Dudes, what's happening? It's Trent again. And first of all, I want to thank you. We're up to 47,600 subscribers. That is cruising. We've seen a bit of a spike recently. I think it's just because I'm doing way cooler stuff. I'm doing way cooler stuff on my channel now. I want to thank you guys really quickly for sharing your own YouTube channels and your own art stations and things of that nature. These are really cool. I'm subbing to everybody who sends me their link. Today I want to talk to you about the last Orchid drawing, and the reason for this, because intentions are so important. The reason for doing this is that Twilight Monk really needed to flesh out the villain. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but let's just jump right into it. So first of all, I'm not messing around anymore I'm just not messing around. It's time to get serious. It's time to get serious about drawing. I was speaking with a friend of mine, and he was saying, dude, what are you doing all these painting things? Like, your strength is in just drawing, straight up raw line art drawing. And I was like, you know what? I'm digging where you're coming from, man. I think I just love doing character designs this way. I don't like to get too photo bashy too much with characters. I don't like to lay down too much like textures and materials. I don't want to deal with a lot of that sometimes. Sometimes I just like the good raw line drawing type stuff. Now, I jumped right in with a kind of a pose that I had found. I think I did this from a study. Like, I kind of keep this folder, and I never really talk much about this, so I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret. I keep this folder of sketches from just bodies that I've drawn. I'll sit down sometimes and just doodle out these forms and shapes of poses that I think are cool and gestural and have a kind of a unique personality. And when I need to design a character who fits that pose, I just pull up that little thumbnail, that little outline, and you saw it at the very beginning. And I'll just start using that as my base, my starting point, and everything else. That way it gives me a chance to just focus on the design of the character, and everything else will sort of start to fall in place from there. Now, this isn't necessarily great for building a model sheet or doing an orthographic view, but that's not really my intention with this piece. This is actually just a straight up illustration. I was looking at some of the artwork that I had been doing, and I realized that I had a lot of really cool kung fu warriors, and I wanted to do something that was elegant and a little bit more designy and refined. I used to work in fashion for a period of time, but it was mostly during the raver years with Jenko jeans and all that stuff. So, but I did get a chance to dig in a little bit with women's clothing design, and I had some really interesting designs. All of that helped me a lot when I transitioned into working in video games. In fact, if you find yourself in a situation where you're not sure if you should take a job, as an artist, I think that you should always pursue the things that you're most passionate about. I had an interest in just moving to Los Angeles, and that's why I had taken that job at the fashion company. But it ended up working out to really help me with making better character designs. And one thing I think that I should discuss while doing this, and yes, this is an illustration, but I am doing a substantial amount of character design in this illustration. And one thing that I wanted to mention is that your character design should always tell the same story that your game is telling the player or that your novel is telling the reader. And by that, I mean, as an example, if you're you're working on a game where a group of young men are traveling cross country to fight demons, you probably don't want them with perfectly styled hair, in white clothes, and decked out with all kinds of jewelry. And what I mean is that the trinkets that a character is wearing, the details that you put in their clothing, the patterns that are marked on their clothing should represent something that is relevant to what that character says and does. It should be direct correlation. For instance, if you have a character who's wearing very elegant, highly detailed and very fashionable, pristine, clean clothing, you can't say that that character is a beggar, for instance. That would be a poor communication of what that character is about. No, if the character is a beggar in your story, then his clothes should be tattered. His clothes should be torn to shreds, and possibly even, you know, his shoes don't match. And, you know, it should communicate all the details of what that character's story is. This is just a very broad stroke kind of a description of what I'm talking about. You simultaneously, you know, just as you wouldn't have a man in a spacesuit in a medieval setting, you know, fighting knights and whatnot, nor should you have, you know, perfectly styled hair on a character who's been living in the wilderness for 2 months. And so with the case of Orchid, she is a bit of a mystic type of shaman type of a character. She has been around for about 1,000 years, and she lives in a dirty old rotted out enormous tree where she commands an army of bird people who she sends out into the world to scavenge and collect mystical and magical trinkets, which may or may not contain ancient and forbidden magics. So if there is any kind of magical trinket or something that possesses secret knowledge or power, she wants to have it. And there's a reason for that. I don't want to ruin the story, so I'm not going to go too much into that. But all of the things that I just told you are somewhat, in some capacity, reflected into her outfit and her costuming. There is a very subtle hint and clue about her origins in her garb as well, in the pattern work, which you'll see on another character or a group of characters somewhere else in the universe of Twilight Monk. This implies, if for those who are paying attention, which I also realize nobody pays this much attention to the details as I do, but you'll notice that there are story elements that intertwine this character to another group, a faction of peoples who she may or may not be affiliated with anymore. Oh, that is so cryptic. Oh, that is so secretive. That is so... What am I doing? I'm implying so much here without any words at all, actually. But will people notice? Probably not, but I will. And I know that eventually, when more of the story is revealed, people will look at this piece and go, oh, I get that. The reason why she has a number of keys interwoven into her hair is that she fancies herself a bit of a gatekeeper. She thinks of herself like she is the one who holds the keys to many secret things in this world of Twilight Monk. You'll also notice that I had a lot of references to orchids. I had a good number of reference images to flowers, and you'll see that it actually shaped a lot of the construction of her outfit. So the way that her layers of clothing interweave are very similar to the way that the petals on the flowers will intertwine and connect and grow out from each other. That's why she has the layering the way that she has it. There also is a reason behind why she would wear a mask, which, I mean, she's a beautiful woman. Why would she wear a mask? Well, there is a good reason for that. And every single detail of this piece has a purpose and a reason behind it. And I would love to go into all of that. And maybe I'll eventually do a little bit more of a behind the scenes video after I've released the story that she's featured. And I apologize that so many of these paintings don't have the story written out for them yet. It's not publicly available. It's mostly in notes that I have. I have about I would say about a 400,000 word document that contains the history and background and cultures for every character and every race in the world of Twilight Monk. And I'm putting together a little bit more of an art book right now that'll hopefully shed some light on a lot of that stuff as well. And that will leave you guys a little bit less in the dark about a lot of what I'm talking about when I'm referring to characters and their histories and their backgrounds. As for the drawing process, you will notice that I switched over to Sketchbook Pro. I almost exclusively use Sketchbook Pro for all of my line drawing type of images now. I will sometimes use Photoshop to kind of rough out my composition and the early stages of if I have to use photographs or if I have to use any kind of reference materials. It's really great for moving images, reference images around, but I actually am beginning to really prefer Sketchbook Pro for their pencil materials and the texturing that you can get. It also forces you to zoom out a little bit and think a little bit less about the tiny, tiny little perfectly crisp pixel details. And I actually prefer that. I need that. I need to loosen up a little bit more, but still keep a lot of the details in terms of the design and the storytelling intact. So after the fact, I dropped it back into Photoshop and I used a gradient map effect and a little bit of color balance effects to get some lighting in there. I just really like the look of it once you've added a little bit of color to even the line art. I'm a sucker for line art, but yet I still like a little bit of color on it. And gradient maps give you the best of both worlds. So that about finishes up the last Orchid. Dudes, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. If you are super hardcore and you would like to watch my slower videos, if you feel like all this is just way too fast, this is a time lapse of about an 8-hour drawing, and you'd like to watch it in a 2-hour version that allows you to see a lot more of the layer effects and you see the structure and the progress at a lot slower speed, you can pick that up on my Gumroad. I will put the link in the description below. And for everybody else, I want to thank you so much for helping me to reach that goal of 50,000 subscribers. I'm really hoping we can make that in the next month or so. If you like my videos and you think that you know somebody who would also like it, please feel free to share it. For everybody else, I will catch you all manyandaban. And remember, when you're designing characters, design your characters with passion. All right, dudes, that's it for me. I will catch you all manyandaban and ciao.